There has been a significant amount of transition since COVID-19, both for you and FPA. So what lessons have you gleaned from all of this transition?
I guess we've all had to learn a lot of lessons from this transition. It's obviously affected everyone in the world, everyone in our country, everyone in our industry and our profession and our association. One of the things I take from it when I allow myself to kind of take a step back is that about the time we think we have everything in control, something comes in from left field to just disrupt our lives. And that's what certainly happened in March of this year. So FPA, like everyone else, had to adjust. And we had to adjust very quickly. And one of the first things we did is we created this series of virtual forums where we invited a few industry leaders to lead discussions on different things, anything from, gee, how are you looking at portfolios right now, to how are you running your business operations right now, to how are you dealing with client anxiety right now. And those were really, really well received. And we did those for a number of weeks or so until they seemed to kind of run their course. We also, the next thing we did is we realized, and we were hearing that students, financial planning students, were getting all of their internships canceled for the summer. And this is a big deal. And in part, they need that to get through their course requirements. And of course, it's extremely important for us to do everything we can to foster the next generation of financial planners. So with Hannah Moore's leadership, we created this externship program this summer, which was a huge hit. We had almost 1,000 active participants in that. And the feedback we got from that was really, really strongly positive. So now we're looking at ways to extend that into the future. And the third thing I'll mention is the whole pandemic disruption coincided with the initial pilot launch of our One FPA network, including the participatory governance element of that plan, where we have our advisory council consisting of a representative from each of the 86 chapters. I was the board liaison for that council this year. And boy, did I learn a lot from having that kind of engagement with the chapters this year, how they were adjusting to the disruption, and in the process, learning from each other about what was working well, what was not working so well. So in the face of a very sudden and severe disruption, I felt like the association reacted well.
Speaking of the association reacting well, how do you define FPA's value in a post-COVID-19 era?
Yeah, so aside from the initial reactions and adjustments, we are now looking ahead to what is the world going to look like going forward. And of course, none of us knows that perfectly, but it does appear that we might be heading for a world where, for example, in-person meetings are no longer the only way that we foster community, or the primary way we foster community within our profession and our association. So again, listening to our chapter leaders and what's working for them, we're exchanging a lot of ideas about programming and how to create community. Of course, we've all been part of lots of virtual happy hours as part of community, as well as more richer content that can deliver continuing education. It's interesting to me that the chapters, not surprisingly, felt some disruption moving from their in-person meetings to their virtual meetings. But interestingly, a silver lining of that seems to be they all say they're getting higher attendance at the virtual events because you don't have the, having to physically travel to a meeting, perhaps from some distance away within a kind of a chapter geographical area. So that's one thing we're paying attention to, and how can we extend that into the future? We're also looking at how can we rethink or reimagine our sponsor relationships? How can we give them equal or even greater value for their valued sponsorship dollars of FPA in a more virtual world as opposed to a more physical world? So a lot of those things we're looking at right now, and how we can not just react and play defense to the disruption, but how can we play offense and come out of this even better?
So the One FPA network remains a key priority for FPA in 2021, and we're entering year 2 of the One FPA network assessment. What are some of the main priorities in this phase?
I've always been a big supporter of the One FPA network, which I guess shouldn't surprise readers and listeners, because I was in the boardroom when it was really developed and approved for rollout. there was too much of a feel, and we heard it from some members, especially when they might move from one geographic region to another and join a different chapter. We especially heard it from our sponsors that it felt like we were 86 separate organizations, not one organization, thus the one FPA moniker. So we were also doing things 86 different ways. Every chapter had its own way of doing things, its own technology platform, its own finance database, and all these sorts of things. And there's just more efficient ways to do things across the organization and look and feel like one. So that was really the set of drivers behind the One FPA network. So, you know, we found out early that people were more open to evolution than revolution in this movement, and that's great. That was great feedback to get. So we adjusted. We went into this pilot phase in 2020. I'm very grateful to the 11 chapters who raised their hands and said, yes, I'm willing to be part of a pilot. Anecdotal evidence has been really strongly positive, especially again by the community, the networking they're getting through a closer affiliation with each other and working together to build a more common platform and a common association. So we want to move beyond the anecdotal. We're going to be soon taking surveys of those involved to really get some quantitative feedback on how it's going, where are our biggest successes, where are we still finding gaps and areas of improvement. We'll be sharing all that data, of course, with the membership. And then moving into 2021 and continuing to build on our successes and improve upon areas where we can so that we can continue moving toward being one entity.
So what are some key advocacy priorities for FPA going into 2021?
Oh, I love your advocacy question. That's where I spent the last 10 years of my professional life. You know, and there are so many, but just to focus on a small handful, it seems like whenever I talk to a member about advocacy and issues, the one thing that seems to come out most consistently is becoming recognized as a profession, and included in that is title protection around if you're going to call yourself a financial planner, you better have certain credentials and certain requirements that you meet in order to do that. So that for me has really become number one after a lot of listening to our members. Eventually, we want to really be considered as a true profession, as I believe we deserve to be, like doctors, like lawyers, like CPAs. I always have to mention teachers. Teachers are a profession, and my daughter is a teacher, so I have to bring that one up as well. They have certain requirements, academic requirements, licensing requirements, continuing education, all those things that go with being a profession. So I think that's a longer term goal. We're not going to become a profession recognized in 2021, but we can continue to move the ball down that field while we focus, I think, in the more near term on title protection as a more intermediate step toward becoming a profession. And ultimately, I should point out too, if we want to be recognized as a profession, we need to be willing to hold ourselves to high standards that consumers expect when they're interacting with a recognized profession. That will certainly necessarily be part of it. We've got elections this year. Elections always bring changes, new policy proposals. So we'll certainly be watching those very closely, be participating in those on behalf of our members, and making sure that we hold ourselves to the highest standard for consumers that we can, deserving of being a profession.